Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. Very happy to have you on board. It's Tuesday, the 23rd at 6 p.m. So if you're watching on Tuesday at 6, you're watching live. As you know, the program is carried at other times during the week. The call-in number, as always, is 640-3091. That's 640-3091. And as I say each week, please feel free to call me with any comments or input that you might have. I'd be very happy to hear from you. We're getting into, we're in the middle of a bunch of things, I guess. It is election season, and so it's hard to watch TV these nights without being buried in national politics. It is not as busy as it is sometimes for. This is an off year in a cycle, so it's not as crazy as it is during the presidential year, but it still is sort of wall to wall, and people can get lost, I think, sometimes in those topics, and it's important that people be aware of things and vote wisely. First of all, vote. But I would hope that local issues are not forgotten. We are going to be electing people in Manchester as state representatives and as to the House, and those people have can have an immediate impact on our lives and our pocketbooks and our bank accounts, and on the quality of services that we have, and particularly on education. So it's a strange thought, but there's a magic bullet out there. People are out. I think tonight is one of the lottery tickets. One of the lotteries. It's $1.6 billion or something. A crazy amount of money can be won. So people, are lining up and making sure that they have a lottery ticket. I think lots of people play who don't usually. I'm somebody who buys a lottery ticket once every 1 to 2 years, and that once to every 1 or 2 years is on a night like tonight. So I get caught up in the same excitement, and of course it's we all know it's just a pretty crazy thing to do with your money, even if it is only $2. But I have to admit, there's some sort of fun in your brain goes to sleep thinking about the practical nature of a 1 in 350 million chance or something. But still, it's fun. But while people go out there and make sure to do that, I wish people were as enthusiastic about voting, and particularly in off-year elections. I was over at UNH week before last for homecoming, and I met there were some students, Manchester students. In this case, they were sophomores, so they're kids who graduated Manchester schools, let's say, a year and a half ago or so. And I was talking to 4 of them, and 2 of them were from Boston, and 2 were from were at UNH. Sorry, residents of Manchester living in going to school in Boston, and the other 2 going to school at UNH. So 3 of the 4 of them actually had gotten absentee ballots, and 2 of those had completed their ballots. So I was delighted to see that in this case of 4 20-year-olds, that 50% of them had voted, and the other and one of the others had at least gotten the absentee ballot, and then we came to the 4th young man, and a wonderful young man he is, and he said he hadn't voted yet, and that he wasn't sure, how he was going to go about it because he's in Boston, and so I could tell just from his responses that that it was highly likely he wasn't going to vote, and because of this young man's particular own family circumstances, which I don't want to get into here or expand upon, other than to say he has people in his family who fall within the category of people who some are intolerant of, and I'm thinking to myself, if you don't go out and vote against some of the nonsense, then I don't know who will. But in the end, I stuck with my advocacy for just voting and not lecturing people on how they should vote. But it's extraordinary to me that that people somehow cannot see the connection between their quality of life on the street that they live in their house, in their city, and in my case, particularly with regard to schools, that they cannot see the connection between that and going out and voting. If I could write it in big enough font, I would. I'd do what former Mayor Ted Gatsis did and fly a plane around the city with a banner hanging out the back of it. In this case, saying "Get out and vote, get out and vote." So I hope that people do. It's our, it's a lot better. You have a lot better chance. Your vote has a lot more influence on what will happen in New Hampshire. Just statistically and mathematically, you'll have a much greater influence on your welfare and well-being by voting than you will by buying a lottery ticket. So please, ladies and gentlemen, go out and vote. The sad news is that people who are fired up on certain topics they're the ones who will go out and vote. The people, so in the school realm, the people who are who were up in Concord for the last couple of years, fighting for Senate Bill 193, which would have caused a reduction in funding from Manchester's public schools. Those people are up for re-election, and others are looking to join them. And you, the people, are going to get to decide who goes there and who doesn't. If the right people, I guess it depends on who you consider right. But if a certain group of people are elected to Concord, then that attack on our public education is likely to go nowhere and wither and die. If another set of people are elected there, then we could see the funding of something like School Bill 193, or the expansion of the so-called tax credit, business tax credit for education, scholarships, etc. All of this stuff, reducing income in the state of New Hampshire or taking state taxes and spending it on private schools, which is unconscionable given the state that our schools are in and the needs that they have. So please go out and vote. It's 2 weeks from today is the 23rd, so it's 2 weeks from tonight. Another thing, tonight actually, the mayor has announced a series of sort of meet and greets with herself. I think I have it up here, perhaps, with herself and maybe I don't. I thought I put it up on my screen here on the left before I came on the air. But tonight there's actually a meeting from 5:30, I think, to 7 or something, and it's on at the police station, and it's an opportunity to meet with Mayor Joyce Craig and with Chief Capano, who will be there tonight. And if you go on the let me see, if you go on the city's website, I think you'll be able to see the dates of other meetings. But they're being held with the mayor and a department head. And they're being held around the city over in the coming couple of months. And so just like Dr. Vargas has been holding his meet and greets or coffee and conversation days, mornings and afternoons with in the schools, Mayor Joyce Craig and department heads are now doing that. So I think it's a wonderful idea to have the department heads there, because if it's people issues like parks and recreation, so to meet with the head of the parks department, if you've got a neighbourhood playground that's not that needs some work, or there are issues going on there, then you get to address both the mayor on the political side and the Parks and Rec director. I know one of those meetings is coming up with him, but the other directors will be doing it as well. So anyway, tonight is the one with the police chief. The more of this that happens, the better. I think it's important that people hear us, because sometimes you think that your voice is like lost in the wilderness. In recent times, and say in the last 12 months or so, I have reduced the number of times that I go to the school board, the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting to speak, because it clearly was not having an effect, and I didn't want to be going for going's sake. It's frustrating and disappointing to know that what is being said is not being understood, and I find it annoying then when other topics are sort of raised and people go and run with them, and it's like following the latest shiny object. And to that end, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at last night's school. There was a school board meeting last night. I didn't spend a lot of time watching it, but one of the things in the few minutes that I didn't have time last night, but I did see a part of the conversation on the so-called HOPE program from West High School. And if you're not in the know about this, it's too long-winded to sort of go into here, perhaps. But this was where the Board of Mayor and Aldermen stepped in and gave $30,000 to an individual who said that he would work with kids who were in danger of dropping out, or who had dropped out, or who were struggling at West High School. And this was done without the communicating with the school board, and so the school board, I think in this case rightfully, was upset that the Board of Mayor and Alderman had sort of stepped in and funded this thing and found $30,000 to do it. I can't believe that here we are, way long into this process, and this is what was being discussed last night. It is frustrating to me. The program is not a program at all. It changed itself to a program recently. It's effectively one young man, or not so young now maybe, but one man in town who happens to be the nephew of Alderman at Large Daniel O'Neill, who this young man, wants to go and if we take him at his word, to help out kids who are having difficulty in the schools. I just don't understand how the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in a city that's now a large enterprise with lots of things going on there is getting wrapped up for weeks, and there are controversies around this topic. It is incredible that they would choose to hand $30,000 of the public's money to an alderman's nephew to run a program that, so it used to be him wanting to help out, and it became the word program so that it would sound better than funding your nephew to go into the schools. And with all due respects to this young man, there is a real need in the city of Manchester. We have eliminated the programs that actually defunded the programs that used to do that work. And having this postage stamp in place, while it suits everybody, and somehow an alderman's nephew, there's $30,000 found for that, so that he can. It's a nonsense. We have kids in our schools. There was a woman, or a parent at least, came before, I think it was a woman, but it was a parent, came before the board meeting a couple of weeks ago, talking about her child who's on the autism spectrum, who is meant to be getting services, and she informed the board that her child was not getting the speech therapy classes or the speech therapy that she was supposed to be getting, that had been mandated by her IEP. That's a legal requirement. I was told recently that 40% of kids in Manchester on special ed are not getting the services that they require. The lady in question, when she spoke to the school board, said that not alone was her child not getting speech therapy, but no child who was on the autism spectrum or who had other challenges was getting speech therapy because the district was unable to supply a speech therapist. And that's just one school. So what's our answer? Well, we know already that we can't, in the city, we can't get enough sub teachers because we pay them less than what they could earn working for a day at Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's. So that's what we think of teachers as a city, or as substitute teachers. We can't get paraprofessionals because we pay them less per hour than what they would get paid to work in any other district or most other districts. And we have teachers who are out of contract, and we have this ongoing contract issue going on with teachers where they were at an impasse and no negotiations are going on. And I saw that the chairman of the negotiating committee from the school board stated, to paraphrase him, they're ready to have another meeting, which I believe is going to happen on November 3rd or 6th, one of those days. And as part of their agreeing to come back to the table, the chairman of the negotiation committee states that I hope they will be understanding, recognize our financial challenges and our, the fact that we don't have a budget to supply any or to make any changes. I mean, changes in terms of salary, etc. But so just think about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have meetings between the representatives of, just in the teachers' case, but there are administrators as well, or administrative assistants, etc. But the group of teachers representing just over 1,000 people in this city. And remember, as I've said many times, each one of those people has a husband or a wife, a son, a daughter, a granny, a granddad, who are being funded. They have a mortgage to pay and food to put on the table. And the city of Manchester has, through its public representatives, has decided they're going to leave those people out there to dangle. And now they want to have a conversation with those 1,000 people and say to them, yeah, we'll negotiate. We want to negotiate with you about your compensation. But just by the way, before we even start the conversation, there is no money there, so we have nothing to bring to the table. We can move things around a little bit. We can make some of the changes we'd like, but we have nothing to give you. What kind of a negotiation is that? That's not a negotiation. So the problem with that negotiation is you go in and you prove to the city, through the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, you're able to prove beyond a doubt, looking at facts and figures, things that some people don't like, and you're able to demonstrate that Manchester school teachers are not being paid the amount of money that they deserve. And the people sitting and say everybody is able to agree, and an alien landing from a foreign planet comes in and looks at it and says, yeah, definitely the teachers, this is what they need to be paid in order to be compensated properly, given all the circumstances. Not compensated properly given if we had some magical world where there was a bottomless pit of money and we could spend whatever we want, but given all the factors, this is what they deserve. And yet, on the other side of the table, from the school board side, the answer is going to be, well, you can reach any rational conclusion you like, but there's no money there, so we're not paying you anything. I think that's extraordinary. When this lady a couple of weeks ago came before the school board to say that her child was not getting the speech therapy, and that no other child in the school was getting it, you would imagine there would have been a big timeout right there. Stop everything. Let's talk about this, because this is not right. We have kids in our school system who are falling behind. Now, think about it. When a young person is meant to have, if you have a child who needs speech therapy, for instance, that child is only 6 for 1 year, 7 for 1 year, 8 for 1 year. If they lose that year, then they've lost it. There's no going back. The fact that you replace the program next year doesn't help that kid. Let's take a call here. Go ahead, caller. Who's calling?
Hi, Jim. This is Phil.
Hello, Phil. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm excellent, thanks. Thanks for calling in. It's good to hear from you. What's on your mind?
Well, first, thank you for your service and getting the word out there. I appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Phil. I think you're the guy out there every day teaching, so.
Oh, thanks. Secondly, I'd like to say I agree with, would never agree 100% because that would be impossible.
Right.
Because that's the way life is, but 99.9% of what you said.
Okay.
And I thank you for saying it and getting it out there. But where you and we have talked about this in the past, vary a little bit. Your call to people to get out to vote. And as an educator, I do that. I mean, it's actually on my board, please vote. Things like that. We want people to be involved. Your voice needs to be heard.
Right.
Be active, get involved, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Your follow-up to that illustrates what I want to talk about.
Okay.
And the fact that, and I'm not going to be a defender of the chairman of the negotiation committee on the school board. That's the last thing I'm going to do.
Okay. Which would be fine too. He needs people to defend him too, I guess. I'm fine with that, but go ahead.
He doesn't need me, believe me.
Yeah.
But to that point, the people that you're asking others to get out to vote for, to support, so their voice is heard, so we're not put in these situations.
Right.
When I get to that point, I'm like, well, especially locally, if I want to forget nationally for a minute and then dial it down a little bit statewide and then concentrate on local.
Right.
But the same thing really does hold true. The people you're asking us to go out and support have put us in this financial bind. They're the ones saying, and still today, no, there is no money.
Right.
And there is no money because that's the way they set up the game. So when you're asking a youngster to go out and vote and support a certain side or a certain point of view or a certain ideology, and I was all for that for many, many years, but I've come to the realization, but really what we're voting between is either you're going to take indifferent or bad, or somewhere in between. It's a shade of a color. It's not black and white. It's not right and wrong. It's not good or bad. So we're in this financial situation, and we have both boards, school board and alderman, predominantly with a D, predominantly to the left.
Yeah, that's a joke. That's a joke, Phil. We'll disagree.
Chairman of negotiations with an R.
Yeah.
And he's going to take all the bullets. Well, the fact is, there is no money, and the reason there's no money is that's the way they set it up.
Right. Let me say this. So first of all, we were all good, So first of all, just on a minor issue, I think people know where my heart is and where my thoughts are. But when I was talking tonight, I just said people should go out and vote, and that it was important to vote for people who were going to, do the right thing by our schools and all the rest of it. And then it's up to people to do their own research and find out, who those people are. I haven't named names, et cetera, et cetera. When you say that's one thing. The second thing is I disagree with you when you say, that people with a D after their name. In other words, like that there's that Democrats and on our two boards are somehow responsible for where we are today. I disagree strongly there because, first of all, the first thing I would say about it is I wish that there was that what you claim existed. You can't get unity. There's probably like 4 different Democratic parties represented in those boards, if you know what I mean, right? There's no the letters after their names mean very little sometimes because they They can't get 8 votes together on something, let alone, the majority for something. But I do agree with this. I agree that all 29 of them, starting with our mayor, and everybody down from there, and the ones we like a lot and the ones we like a little bit and the ones we know well and the ones we don't, between all 29 of them, they're the ones who got us where we are. And so the blame rests with them. And I did say last week, I talked last week about starting with Mayor Craig, and I pointed out that, the excuse used by Mayor Gatsis when he was in office was, he's just the mayor, and it takes the other 14. He can only do so much. And I quoted that last week, and I said the same applies to Mayor Joyce Craig. Like if it's true for Ted Gatsis, it's true for Joyce Craig. She is the mayor. She's the one who should be screaming about it loudest and first. So it starts with her. And I agree with you 100% that they could change this tomorrow if they had the kahunas to actually do it.
Right. And I agree with you on that. And forget the D's and the R's and the political parties and all those things. And I applaud you for saying what you said. But my point without the D's and the R's is this. The whole group of them, basically, not, I shouldn't say the whole because you can never include everybody.
Right.
But the vast majority hide behind that tax cap.
Right.
Or they hide behind spending. Or they hide behind consolidations. Or they hide behind, like you like to say, the shiny object.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, if you really got in a room with logical people and looked at just the facts, you'd say, we don't have enough money. And there's a million reasons for it.
Right.
And the only people that can change that are those elected officials. This tax cap doesn't mean you can't raise taxes. It means it takes 10 of you.
Right.
It means somebody has to take charge.
Right.
And where I get a little bit different than some people is, at least I know, and I'll use names, the Ted Gatsis and the people of his party tell me, we're not going to raise taxes.
Right.
And the other people say, well, we need to take care of all these things. But then when it comes time to do it, they say, well, if I go bust the tax cap, I won't be in office, and then where am I? Or then where are we?
Just to take it.
Why don't we figure it out and let's do it?
Let's
do this. Let's get the money in. Let's take care of the children. Let's run it like we're supposed to, and then we'll see what happens.
Right.
But no, they don't do that.
I agree with that. We're paying. Sorry, just wanted to say that going around just when you say that again you are going back to Ted Gatsis or people with R after their name. At least they tell us what they're going to do and they go ahead and do it, and that's not true either, right? There are people with R's after the Republicans who have gone along with overriding the tax cap. After all, they're shouting and screaming about they won't. Now, by the way, I agree with them. I think they should. I think the moral thing to do is that they should. But they're no more, pristine here and true to their word than anybody else is. Because,
No, obviously not, Jim. But my point is, and when you override the tax cap and we need $4 million and you get $400,000, don't even bother going through the motion.
Right.
It's not helping.
Right. I agree.
It's just semantics.
Right.
The real point is this. Some people believe that we have a spending problem. Some people believe that we have a revenue problem. The people that believe we have a spending problem, they tell me to my face we have a spending problem. The people that believe we have a revenue problem don't say it because they'll lose their elections. And I'm tired of that.
Okay. So let me put it another way to you. The people who say we have a spending problem have no facts, no data, and no truth on their side. And if you do, like you may have done, but I've spent hours, weeks, months talking with people, asking them, going back and forth in some process where we're having a discussion. And when you get to the end of the conversation, they are left standing there naked. They have no place left to stand. We have the least well-funded schools in the district. We've got the highest number of pupil in the pupil-teacher ratios. We've got everything, all the metrics, all the data shows that we do not have a spending problem. We do not have a spending problem in our district. But when they're finished with all their red herrings and all their BS and all their excuses, what they're left with is their political ideology, which is that they simply don't like public schools. They don't really think they should be funded.
Well, take a break for a second.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you just said. And
Right.
you just made my point for me.
Right.
Because I've been doing the same thing my whole life, or my whole adult life.
Right.
But the rest of that sentence is, on the other side of the coin, you can have that same conversation with other people, and then their answer is, well, we just don't have the money. It's all set up that way.
Right.
We can't do anything. We're all done. We've already been set up. There's no money in the budget.
I talked to a
the tax cap. We
right.
can't do anything.
It's
not our fault.
Yeah,
what do people want.
We're
That's
agreed
my
here.
Whole point. You just made my whole point
I
for
do.
me.
And we agree.
Both sides are saying the same thing, and they're both getting reelected. And it's as plain as the nose on our face.
If
so my tactic is, forget the people who are not going to change their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Let's work on the people. Danny O'Neill, Billy Barry, Sarah Ambrosi. You can go on and on and on and on and on. Leslie Warren. The pro-education, Manchester schools, better education. Well, okay. Well, then say we need some more money.
Right.
Say it. No, they don't say it. They say, well, my hands are tied. Well, your hands aren't tied.
Right.
Your hands are not tied. And I'm hoping that I can turn the dial just a little bit with you, because you do such a nice job and you do have a forum. We get it now. We're all right. We can all beat up Rich Gerard and Frank Ginter and the rest of them. All right. That's old news.
Yeah. I don't think I've been doing that, by the way.
What's that?
I haven't done either of those two things, but go ahead.
But Jim.
Yeah.
You know my sentiment.
I do.
Don't put words in my mouth.
I'm not.
You know where I'm going with it.
I do. No, I'm just saying. I'm just making the point that I try not to personalize it because I could get all fired up about it because it drives me nuts. But you're right. Like the bottom line. I wish I have quoted people in the past. Pat Long just got renominated or nominated. He's now on the school board, and Pat Long is a guy. I like Pat Long. He's a good guy. In my books, like many people are. Yeah. But when we were talking about, when I was talking to him a year ago, let's say, when he was still on the board of Mayor and Alderman in Ward 3, I said to him about, our schools are drastically underfunded, and like someone in this board, and he was, the vice chair, and it's like when are you going to stand up and fight for it? And his answer to me was. Yeah. Putting words in his mouth, but it's sort of, we'd love to do all that, but that's not possible. And his answer was, find me a project for, something that the schools need that's an extra $20 or $30 or $40,000 that we can bite off, and that I can get the fellow board members to vote for something like that. And I said to him, you've got to be flipping joking me. We are so. Just a quote for people listening a minute, right? So just as an example, just rough math, right? The average expenditure for students in the state of New Hampshire is $15,500. Let's just call it 15. And we have 14,000 students. That means our budget should be $210 million. It is 170. So we need $40 million more just to have the average education in the state of New Hampshire, and remembering all the time that we have the most needy population, we've got the highest percentage of free and reduced lunches, we've got a large urban area with all the challenges that implies. So we shouldn't be average, we should be the most expensive district. But just to be the average, we need $40 million more, and God bless Pat Long, and he's a nice guy and I like him, but his answer to me was, find me something worth $30,000 and we can talk about that. And you're dead right. It's a waste of time. They don't get it.
Can I thank you?
You don't have to thank me. I'm not that special or deserve that much thanks.
I want to thank you because you just made my point.
Right.
Let me expound on it.
Okay.
The superintendent of schools and the school board are mandated for whatever reason. There's two different legal opinions, but they have to give a tax cap budget. So finally we have a superintendent that will give a tax cap budget. But he also says, here's what I'm asking for.
Right.
Now, there's a difference between what I'm asking for and what I really need. He says, here's what I'm asking for, and here's what the district will look like if I get it.
Right.
Now, we all know that if he asked what he needed, it's too big that nobody would even discuss it.
Well,
so what you need
I
is
would.
off the table. Okay.
Yeah.
So he gives the tax cap, then he says what he's asking for because he's trying to be realistic, and then we all know the number that he really needs, or at least close. We know it's big.
Right.
And if you don't know it, just walk in the schools. You'll see it. Halftime counselors, no alternative programs, reading specialists that are in dire need, people not getting speech. I mean, on and on and on and on and on.
Right.
So we can all, any reasonable person can agree with that, elected or non-elected. Right? So you follow me so far?
I do. Except that there are people
Okay,
who don't
so
agree
let
with
me
you, but
finish. Let me
reasonable
finish.
people should. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not bashing Pat Long.
No, I know.
Guy does a lot for the city, but here it is. Maybe only in Manchester. Can you come in with a budget, and he helped write it, somewhere between the tax cap budget and what the superintendent asked for? So it's not what he needs, just what he asked for. So you come in somewhere in between. And then the framework of that is from the people that you want everyone to go out and vote for, or you promote, we need to. They say that was extra money. Really? It's not extra.
Mm-hmm.
We needed X, and you gave us X minus whatever. It's not extra. There's no extra.
Right.
Not only does he do that, but then that same board appoints him to the school board.
Right.
So do you get my point? You and I are just, we're swimming against the tide. This is ridiculous. And Pat's a good guy, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But he crafted the budget that shortchanged the school district. Now he's on the school board.
Right.
I mean, you can't get any crazier than that, I don't think.
Well, you could, because there were a lot of other crazy people you could have put on there. Right, there were people on there who wouldn't support anything, who just don't agree that the schools need anything.
Yeah. So again, you're taking me literally and saying
No.
there is someone you can get.
No, but I mean,
But please acknowledge the fact that that's kind of ridiculous.
no, I do acknowledge it.
And it's the city fathers that did it,
Absolutely.
and it's the city fathers that are getting the insurance, and it's the city fathers that don't want to bust the tax cap.
Right.
So my point to you, Jim, is we're surrounded.
Right. But then that's
We're surrounded.
yeah. But that's
Doesn't
like
matter if Trump's the president or if,
Yes, it does. Yes, it
all
does.
That stuff is all secondary. I
No.
mean, it matters in the big scheme of things. Don't get me wrong.
It
But
does.
my point is, it's not their fault. It's our fault.
Correct.
And it's the 29 of them's fault.
right.
And we could really make change in a city of 100,000 or 110,000 with 29 leaders if we wanted to.
But people,
or if they wanted to.
right?
Not us.
My point tonight, when I was talking earlier about the elections coming up 2 weeks from tonight, and I was talking about the House and the Senate here in the state of New Hampshire. Before you go anywhere else, just here in the state of New Hampshire. I didn't talk about the governor's race. I didn't talk about executive council. And I didn't talk about the congressional districts. I talked about the people being elected to Concord, and I made the point that it's complete. I was using the analogy with the lottery ticket. You know, if people would just, the chances of me winning a lottery ticket are pretty slim. But if people in Manchester just went out and voted for the representatives who would support our schools, we could change everything. It would be a new day. We'll have a new day on November 7th. Well, actually, it would start in January, but we'd have a new day. And the attacks on our public schools would be gone
I
away.
hate to poke holes in your argument.
Okay.
I hate to poke holes in your argument. John Emmett, most popular governor ever in New Hampshire, 10 years.
Yeah.
Maggie Hassan, Gene Shaheen.
Yeah.
And at least once, but maybe more than once,
Yeah.
they had control of the House and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what the minimum wage is in New Hampshire? $7.50 an hour.
Believe me, I know.
So, I believe me, I know too.
Yeah.
But here's my point: it's not Greg Ben's fault or anyone else's fault. We had it and we didn't do anything with it.
Who did you say? You lost me for a second. It's not whose fault?
I'm saying Greg Benson.
Oh, Craig Benson.
who was
Okay.
Governor Craig Benson.
Yeah.
My point is this: you want to go and elect the right people, you're still going to have $7.50 an hour for a minimum wage. It's been proven.
No, I don't agree.
So as much as you want to, promote that, when push comes to shove and they get power, when they get the power, it really doesn't really go anywhere. It's just, we move the needle a little bit, but we don't need it to where we need to move it.
So, but
the mental health situation in New Hampshire is ridiculous.
Atrocious. Correct.
The opioid addiction thing didn't happen by accident.
Right.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Our hands are all over it. So enough with, geez, it's the other guy's fault. No, it's not the other guy's fault. It's everybody's fault. mine included.
Well, it starts with the people who vote for the people they vote in office. You know, the people who we've put in office have got this, you know.
Just explain to you, Jim. We put in the most popular governor 5 terms in a row.
Yeah.
Then we had Shaheen and we had Hassan, and they had the House and the Senate, and nothing get done.
Well, it's not
You know
true.
what their point was? Well, it didn't get worse. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
that's
thanks. It didn't get worse.
right. But I understand what you're saying, Phil. It's just that in the end, you know, we have the candidates that we have that we get to choose between, and in the end, I think that people do respond to public pressure. The real problem, and I hate to bring it around in a big circle, the real problem is with the average man and woman in the city of Manchester watching this show or walking around the
Not
streets
watching
every
it.
day or not watching it. That might make them smart, but the real problem is that people are not pressurizing them, and it's amazing to me, and I was going to go on to it tonight. There's this lady who works for a right wing think tank, and you know, she sends a letter out to all to the board of mayor and aldermen, or to the school board, and you know, criticising Manchester Proud and the efforts of Manchester Proud, and this same lady, who's certainly entitled to her opinion, but she used to live in Bedford. Now she's formerly of Bedford. I don't know what town she's in, but not Manchester. And she writes a letter this week criticising Manchester Proud, which is Manchester business people and the Chamber of Commerce and all the wonderful people in this city, and she sends a letter to the school board members telling them that she's suspicious of Manchester Proud, etc. And I know in conversations that I'll be having with some school board members in the next 2 or 3 weeks, this lady's letter is going to be quoted to me. And it's the most frustrating thing in the world. I'm thinking, why don't some Manchester residents stand up and say, hey, don't be quoting the lady from Bedford who wants to, you know, tear down, you know, and wants to promote private and religious education. Why are you listening to her letters and not listening to me? If the average person...
Maybe you haven't heard me, Jim. Let me finish.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't heard me.
I've heard you.
Tell you why they're not standing up. Because when they stand up like I have,
Yeah.
the other side doesn't listen either.
Right.
That's the whole point of our conversation.
Right.
Now you get it?
I get it. I just
doesn't listen. The right doesn't
right.
listen.
Right.
We're $40 million short.
Yeah.
It's not all because of the right. It's because of
Oh.
the right and the left.
I agree with that. You've got no
guess
argument
what?
there.
Jim,
Yeah.
time out.
Yeah.
Stop yelling at the right. Let's yell at the left for a couple of weeks.
I don't know where you get yelling at the right from. I don't know what yelling at the right have
I'm
done.
not talking about you specifically. I'm
Okay.
talking about in general.
Okay.
If we remove that shiny dot over there
Yeah.
on the right,
Yeah.
we can concentrate on the left and try and move the needle.
Right.
That's where I want to move the needle.
Understood.
It's called a sales and an income tax.
Yep. A broad-based
Oh,
tax,
boy,
whatever
I
it
said
might
those
be.
Words, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Wow.
understand what the problem is. You know, there's no what the system we have today is patently unfair. There are people paying
You
tax.
don't understand the problem. I'm trying to explain it to you. They don't want to go there because they won't get elected.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yes, I
Now,
agree.
You got it?
I know.
They don't want to go there because they won't get elected. It's not about taking care of people. It's not about taking care of kids. It's not about doing the right thing.
Right.
It's about doing a little bit better than the guy that's doing nothing.
I agree. I've said on this
right.
program a number of times about there would be nothing wrong with being a one-term mayor or a one-term alderman. What's wrong with that if you did the right thing?
Right.
Phil, I'll let you go. Listen,
well,
thank you for calling in.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you. Bye-bye. So that is the Phil Sapienza, a man who's been involved in education for a long time, a great, city resident who's passionate about our schools, and as you can hear, is frustrated by where we find ourselves. We may differ politically. I do hear what he has to say, except that when you take it to its ultimate conclusion, you're saying, look, we're going to excuse people. So take the example of it doesn't matter who's in power. And I don't want to put words in his mouth at all, but it does matter because Chris Sununu would have signed Senate Bill 193. Chris Sununu is the one who put Edelblut in charge of the Department of Education. Chris Sununu is the one who put Drew Klein made him chairman of the state board. Now, I agree 100%. that we got to where we are today in Manchester without Chris Sununu's help. It's not his fault. So I'm clear about that. And it would be wrong to say, oh, if only we could have a different. Cause suddenly, if Molly Kelly were elected in 2 weeks' time, that the world would all change. It wouldn't. But also it's unfair to pretend that there isn't a consequence to our actions. The reason why, one of the reasons why there's not commuter rail in Manchester is because people, as Phil would say, with R's after their name, voted down the funding time and again. So there is a consequence. It's slow and it's frustrating, and there's nobody. I understand Phil's frustration. There's nobody more frustrated at, I hate to get into the Democrat-Republican thing, but there's nobody more frustrated at Democrats. If people who think that there are Democrats, like Phil said, on our school board and board mayor and aldermen, that they deserve the blame. Everybody deserves blame, but I only wish that there was a cohesive group that you can actually move the needle with. But it doesn't really apply in our local elections. So. We as Phil said, we agree on many things and disagree around the edges. I bet, but in the end, the story, the little vignette about Pat Long that I named, is just that's how it is. So it's sort of Pat's a great guy and I like him. The story wasn't anti-Pat Long. It was to point out that that's what our public representatives, they're not willing to sit down and say this is the size and scale of our problem. And what are we actually going to do about it? So instead of that, it's like, where's the tax cap budget? Let's add a couple of 100,000 to that, and then we'll all be okay. And that's just simply not good enough. Manchester, with a united voice, should be saying what we're doing to our teachers today is unconscionable. Like, just sitting on, if you are a member of the school board or the board mayor and alderman in Manchester today, and you're sitting just at the actions of the last 2 weeks, and you're seeing money found for 2 or 3 different groups in the city, the firefighters and others, none of whom were given hugely generous awards or anything, but the fact is that this has all been done, and you can't see the injustice of having the largest group of employees in the city sitting there for the umpteenth time over the last 10 years out of contract, and they're already leaving. We're losing good teachers, etc. And you're sitting there as the person appointed, voted into office to solve this problem. And this problem, you didn't create it today. It's not about what you did today. It's the fact that back at the beginning of this year, you voted for a budget that was inadequate to do the job. And so my question of you would be, if Granite Street Bridge was down to 1 lane because it was the concrete was compromised or something, and the bill for it to do it was whatever the number, $100 million. Coming up with 100,000 and saying, well, it's 100,000 more than we had. There's still only 1 car an hour getting across the rickety bridge, and we need a bridge across the city. So the answer is, as public representatives, to go and find a plan to fix the bridge, or get together with a united voice and go up to Concord and demand the funding from there, or demand the funding from the Federal Department of Transportation. The same is true here in Manchester. It should be an easy task for 14 members plus the mayor of the school board to say that what is happening in our schools is immoral, unjust, unjustifiable, and indefensible. And then to say that I, as a public representative in the city of Manchester, was not elected to manage a half-hearted, not properly funded, a place where some kids certainly are doing great, but where there are kids falling off the edge all day long. And I, as a public representative, are going to sit there and do my 2 years and say, well, I tried and I did my best. To hell with trying, you did your best. If you appreciate that the city of Manchester ought to have the schools that other cities and towns in the state of New Hampshire have, then you should. There's a simple answer. When the budget comes along, fund the schools in the way in which they need to be funded. And especially now, ladies and gentlemen, because, back 10 years ago, after the abomination of 2008 and the housing and mortgage collapse, etc., at least there was some defense for this. And by the way, make no mistake, long before 2008, back in Phil mentioned Frank Ginta, back in Frank Ginta's days and before, there was fights going on about our schools and the need for adequately funding our schools. So this problem didn't start in 2008. But if you at least look at 2008 to 2010, you could say, well, the economy is, there's foreclosures going on. The economy is in some difficulty. We can't afford to be expansive. We're going to have to retract and pull in our horns, etc. What excuse do you have today? As a politician, just forget about the morals of it now. Just as a politician, you don't think that the people of Manchester would not support a dynamic, expansive, progressive, and be that liberal or conservative, but somebody who had the vision to look at Manchester as a bright new city with increasing property values and increasing numbers of people wanting to come and live here and a growing population. You don't see that? You don't think people would buy into that vision? Instead of that, what you're buying into is this mealy-mouthed 19th century falling down Milltown image, which is, Mill City image, which is, our better days are behind us and we can't afford what those other people have over there. It's all a flipping nonsense. Stand up. There was a piece on WBUR today, Boston University Radio on NPR, out of Boston on 90.9 FM. There was a piece on today talking about the city of Worcester, and how in the city of Worcester that a number of things are happening because Boston has got the is now the seventh most expensive city in the world to buy a house or rent an apartment in. The seventh most. The number one is Hong Kong. Number 7 is Boston. As a result of that, numbers of people are moving out to the satellite city, the next big city outside of Boston, which, by the way, is 48 miles from Boston. We are 50 miles from Boston. The city of Worcester has property prices going up at a rate where local people are worried about the ability of locals to be able to afford housing there, because the downtown area of Worcester is booming. They have a population. They've got a growing population in a part of the world, New England, where there's generally declining populations. They've got a growing population in Worcester. They're expanding. Their property values are expanding. The city council or aldermen in Worcester have approved $2.8 billion worth of new projects in the last year and a half. $2.8 billion worth of expansion in the city of Worcester. Now tell me, members of the board, mayor and aldermen and the school board, what is it that Worcester has that Manchester doesn't have? Or put it another way, look at all the things that Manchester has that Worcester doesn't. With all due respects to Worcester, Manchester is a much more attractive place and a much nicer place to live in, with more inherent value than Worcester has. We've got an airport. We've got a beautiful river. We've got access to the seacoast. We've got access to skiing. I don't have to tell you. So there's a million reasons. It's low-hanging fruit to go down to Boston today and capture some of the executives coming in to the new companies that are opening up in Boston, to attract them into New Hampshire. I don't know who gets paid to do that today. I know that Manchester doesn't really have an advertising budget. 3 years ago, I used to mock it because our promotion budget for the city was $10,000. And as I said at the time, there are pizza places on South Willow Street who spend more on literature a year advertising their store than the city of Manchester does advertising itself. So that's how much our great aldermen value our city and their vision and excitement for the future. Here, go out and buy something with $10,000. It's a joke. It should be torn up and thrown back in their faces. There is no reason why Manchester cannot be an exciting, dynamic, growing, a vital place to live, where property values are increasing, where people are living happy and safe and peaceful lives, with a great school system, with great schools, shiny buildings, beautiful equipment, well-resourced teachers, well-paid teachers, students having playing fields and equipment and technology classes, and yes, all the other things, trades and technology and science and music departments. Why can't we have great marching bands? And we do have decent music department, don't get me wrong, but why don't we have an art director? Why don't we have a citywide director of athletics? Why don't we have the things that a school system for a proud city like Manchester ought to be? Please ignore the people who are shouting at the system. The fact that these people are coming in from outside, writing letters to that you, the public, may not know about, but they're spreading their with support by members of the school board, by the way, right, who are their pals. Some, a small group of them, who support this idea of defunding public schools and sending money out and privatization. There's no reason to be listening to them. There's an exciting future available for Manchester, but only if the current Board of Mayor and Aldermen get off their duff, and the school board, and actually fund the school system in the way that it needs to be funded. And that, by the way, ultimately, there is no way, just so you all know, there is no way to adequately fund our schools depending on property taxes and the property owners of the city of Manchester. The downshifting of costs from Concord has to come to an end and has to be rolled back. So we know the figure from Dr. Vargas for just the cut by the hand downs on the city on the school side. Not just on the city side, just on the school side, the passing down of pension costs to the city of Manchester, that the city has no control over, is $4 or $5 million a year. On a rough calculation, $5 million is that's 100 teachers. So we could hire 100 teachers if that's what we chose to do with it. We could hire 100 teachers and retain them just with that one change right there. But no, we won't. We won't do that. So the need is for courage on behalf of our public representatives to actually do the right thing, and they'll do the right thing, ladies and gentlemen, if you, the people, actually put it up to them. Remember, though, that the election in 2 weeks' time is for governor, executive council, the congressional district, both of them, but the one for here, and then, of course, our representatives in Concord. And voting people, there are people running for office who are nihilists and who are anti-establishment, and so their view is to tear down the edifice, tear down the structure. If that's who you choose to vote for, then there are real consequences to that. When Bill O'Brien and his buddies went wild up in Concord 5 or 6 years ago, and despite the efforts of Governor Lynch at the time, had the numbers to do it and decimated our school funding, that was done because people voted for those people into office. So we have the control. We have it within our own. Like I said about the lottery ticket thing. Get out and vote. Bring a friend. Talk to the person next to you and convince people that, as our schools go, so go our city. We cannot have a great city unless we have schools that people are excited for their children to go to, that they're proud of, and that they want, and people want to come to our city to avail themselves of the great education that Manchester has. Make no mistake, there's lots of good things happening in our schools, but we have still a lot of work to do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for another night. I appreciate you being with us, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And thanks to Phil for the call. All the best. Bye-bye.